I wake to the sound of air being born. It comes from the vents above my cot, that first stuttering gasp of the filtration pumps, coughing dust into breath. It's how we all wake down here, not to bells or hymns, but to the hive remembering to breathe. There's a rhythm to the sound. Hiss, choke, thrum. We wait for that third note. The thrum, if it comes, we live another day. If it doesn't, we stay very still and pray the backup pumps find mercy before we suffocate. The walls sweat in the heat. They always do, even when the upper levels freeze. I press my hand to the metal beside me, feeling the slow vibration that means the manufactorum's heart still beats. The hum is constant, like a buried choir. Some say it's the Emperor's voice, trapped in the walls. Others say it's only the gas pipes singing. I've never decided which I believe. Sometimes, when the filters clog, the air turns sharp. It stings the tongue, makes the eyes water. The priests call that holy bitterness. They say every breath is proof of our worth, that the Emperor tests the lungs of the faithful by filling them with smoke. I used to think that was just talk. But then I saw a man drop in the line from coughing, and the priest blessed his body before they scraped it into the recycler. So maybe it's true. When the vents clear, the air smells faintly of oil and ozone. That's how you know it's clean. Oil means the machine is healthy. Ozone means the lightning rods are still drinking the storms above. The horn sounds above us, a single long note that shakes the cots and rattles the teeth. Shift call. Amber light spills from the ceiling tubes, dim as candle flame. The shadows stretch long across the floor. I rise with the rest. My knees ache. My palms are scarred from years of bolts and steel edges. The same routine every morning: tighten the mask strap, drain the condensation cup, kneel for the morning creed. The Emperor sees through the smoke. His hand steadies the machine. His mercy is in the breath. It's a child's prayer. My mother taught it to me long before I could reach the workbench. She'd whisper it between coughs, making the Aquila with trembling fingers. She said it wasn't the words that mattered, it was the sound, the act of breathing them. Even the air is listening, she told me once. It carries the faithful upward. She died when the air stopped, years ago. The pump failed during the night. They found her pressed against the vent grill, lips black. The foreman said she'd gone peacefully, that the Emperor had drawn her breath into his own. I didn't argue. The corridors outside are narrow and wet. Rust blooms along the walls in the shape of forgotten sigils. The floor grates sweat condensation that drips through to the unseen depths. Somewhere below, 1,000 other lives move in rhythm with ours. We march in silence, masks tight, heads low. Talking wastes air. Every corridor is marked by number and rune. The same dull bronze plaques repeating every few meters. C-17, approved passage. At the turn toward the lift shaft, a servo skull hovers, its vox grill caked with soot. It drones the morning litany. Work is worship. Worship is breath. Breathe deeply, children of man. Its voice crackles, stutters, repeats. Someone once tried to clean it, but the chemicals corroded half the bone. Now the jaw hangs loose, whispering instead of speaking. Still, no one ignores it. We bow as we pass. We descend through the lift tunnels, cages rattling on chains thicker than my arm. The air grows hotter the lower we go, until every breath feels like inhaling through cloth soaked in steam. I can feel my heartbeat echo in my teeth. Below, the manufactorum spreads like a city unto itself, endless levels of light and smoke, furnaces roaring like beasts, conveyor arms swing above the crowd, lowering crates of munitions and scrap. The air is gold and red, heavy with heat. I work at Assembly Line 32B, Section Tau. It hasn't changed in 12 years. My bench is a scarred stretch of metal etched with prayers. Breathe. Serve. Obey. The belt carries the shell's brass cylinders large enough to cradle a child. My job is to fasten the stabilizing bolts, check the pressure seals, mark each with the twin-headed eagle. Twist, press, lift, release, a ritual older than memory. The overseers walk the catwalks above us. Black visors glowing red. They never shout. They don't have to. A glance from above is enough to still the entire line. Their boots echo on the steel in time with the pistons. The rhythm of obedience. I don't know where our munitions go. Some say they feed the warfront on Malfi. Others say the Astra Militarum takes them straight from orbit. I used to wonder what the shells would destroy, what kind of lives they'd end. But wondering wastes time, and time is measured in rations. They tell us the Emperor knows where every bullet flies. That's enough for me. By mid-shift, the air is thick enough to drink. The filters hum like trapped bees. Sweat pools in my gloves. Pain becomes a form of attention. It means I am still real. During rest hour, we gather near the coolant pipes. They weep condensation that we catch in cracked cups. The water tastes of rust and hope. The foreman stands before us. His robes patched with machine oil. His voice hoarse from smoke. We are the pulse. We are the breath. The Emperor's work does not end, and so neither shall we. We echo him, the words trembling through our masks. For a moment, the echo sounds like a crowd praying inside a cathedral. Metallic, endless, holy. Someone coughs blood into their hands. The droplets hiss on the pipe's heat. No one looks. Death is the hive's tithe, and the machine must eat. When the rest horn sounds, the lamps shift to red. They say the red light means the Emperor's gaze no longer reaches this deep, that the glow itself is his blood keeping us warm. The line resumes. Bolts, seals, marks. The same gestures repeated until memory becomes instinct. There is a beauty in repetition. It makes the mind quiet. Sometimes I imagine the manufactorum as an immense organ, and we are its pipes. The pistons play the hymns. The gears hum in harmony. The sparks rise like incense. And in that endless rhythm, I find peace. Not joy. Joy is too bright for us. But peace, yes, the kind that comes when you stop being separate from the noise. When you become one more sound in the Emperor's breathing. When the shift finally ends, the silence feels wrong. The air trembles in my ears, still remembering the roar. Without the machines, the hive feels too large, too empty. We file back through the lower corridors, slow, half asleep on our feet. The devotional wall waits for us there, a sheet of rusted iron etched with thousands of names. Workers carve them with nails, wire, or shards of scrap. Each letter is a prayer. See me, remember me. I trace one near the bottom. My mother's name. The grooves are faint now, filled with dust. I whisper her creed. The Emperor sees through the smoke. The metal is cold under my fingers, like the skin of something that has stopped breathing. In the hab block, the air is cooler, filtered from the upper manufactoria. The vents hiss softly, tired lungs exhaling. The light is low, blue-gray, just enough to see the outlines of the others folding into sleep. Children murmur half-formed prayers in their cots. Someone nearby hums a hymn, slow and cracked, more rhythm than melody. A man recites production quotas in his sleep like litany. I sit beside my cot and take out the Vox recorder. It's an old model, dented and trembling, sealed with wax and faith. The machine spirits inside complain as it boots, sputtering static before finding voice. I speak quietly so the others won't stir. If you hear this, my lord, forgive the weakness of my words. I am a worker of Section Tau, Serial 73 Epsilon. I breathe your air. I bolt your shells. I endure. The device hums, recording in its ancient whine. They tell us the poor are nearest to you. That suffering is sanctity. I have tried to believe this, even when the vents filled with smoke. even when the water turned black. I have tried to thank you for breath, even when it burns. I pause. The static between my words sounds like distant chanting. There are moments, my lord, when I feel you close, not in the light above, but in the hum of the walls. In the way the air shudders before the filters die. It feels like you're breathing with us. And other times, I wonder if you're holding your breath, waiting for us to stop first. The vox crackles softly. I think the machine is praying with me. If you are listening, then know this. We are still breathing. We are still faithful, even if the air runs out. I switch the vox off. The hum of the manufactorum seeps through the walls, low and endless. The vents above exhale again, a single deep sigh, like a god asleep. I close my eyes and listen. The air tastes of rust and oil. I wonder if he breathes with us, or if he only listens when the air stops. The ceiling shakes again tonight. It sounds like thunder, but thunder doesn't happen down here. It's the hive settling, old metal sighing under its own memory, a beast turning in its sleep and scraping bone on bone. Dust falls in a soft drift over the cots. The air tastes of burnt copper, like a coin held too long on the tongue. The lamps stutter a slow blink. A single breath of darkness, and in that abeyance I feel the world prepare to end. Then the light returns. Tired, amber, apologetic. We keep still for a heartbeat more, listening for the second tremor, the sign that a seam somewhere has finally lost interest in being a seam. It doesn't come. The vents resume their weak exhalation. Life pretends it never paused. That's how it is here. The apocalypse visits in brief, polite moments. Then it leaves us to our quota. A few shifts ago, the ceiling did fall. Not here, 3 corridors east. Section Delta. We smelled it before we heard it. A warmth in the air that wasn't heat. An electric tang like a storm, bottled and shaken. Then the sound arrived late and wrong, a heaving groan followed by a note so low I felt it inside my teeth. Everyone on the line paused without being told. We watched the red lamps tremble. The conveyor arms slowed as if in prayer. When the noise faded, we did the math we always do. How many meters away? How many levels? How soon the smoke will reach our vent? They said 500 died. Maybe more. The overseers sealed the tunnels before the dust finished deciding where to sit. They welded a gate across the mouth of the corridor and pressed purity seals onto the warm metal little tongues of parchment with ink still wet, fluttering in the new draft. Sanctioned failure, the stamp said. I remember the sound of incense spilling from the priest's censer like sand. I remember how sweet it smelled for a day and then turned sour, as if holiness itself had gone bad in the pipes. We did not speak of it. The line took its breath again, and so did we. The dead became part of the quotient, their portion of bolts and shells redistributed across our rows. The machine forgave them quickly. The machine always forgives faster than we do. I pass the sealed corridor sometimes on the way to Lift Bay 14. The purity seals hang brittle now, ink smudged into a universal gray. A servo skull keeps watch, jaw slack with age. It drifts with the caution of a tired thing, trailing ribbons of scripture that snag on nothing. Its vox mutters, "Work is worship. Worship is breath." If it catches me looking too long, it turns its optics toward me. A widening, a brightening, not quite accusation, not quite comfort. Once, without thinking, I pressed my palm to the seal and whispered into the hairline crack at the gate's edge, "May the Emperor find you in the dark." The skull made a small, surprised noise, like a prayer forgetting its place, and then returned to its loop. I walked on with the feeling that I had sighed where a hymn should be. The manufactorum received the news in the only language it speaks. More work. Our section absorbed the Delta quota, and the foreman tacked a grease-marked slate over our bench with the new numbers. He read the litany of function a little louder that shift, voice fracturing on the parts about endurance. No one complained. Complaint is a kind of luxury. It takes air and time, and both are rationed. We met the new quota by moving a little more like servitors, a little less like people. But the weight changed. Not just the count in the ledger. I mean the weight in the walls. The pistons sounded as if they labored not against resistance, but against memory. The belts caught themselves on invisible hesitation. Sometimes, when the gears bit, there was a whisper, a shape in the sound, like words rounded smooth by repetition. If I let my mind soften into the noise, I thought I could hear names. Kara old, 90 maybe, or perhaps 40 with a lifetime of dust inside, told me during rest hour that she had seen them. Not with eyes, she said, but with breath. They're still at it. She told anyone who'd listen, though her voice was too quiet to carry. Down there, under the plates, tightening bolts where they are. The Emperor wouldn't waste a good habit. Some crossed themselves quickly. One man laughed, and then clamped his mouth shut as if the laugh might let daylight in. I didn't say anything. I only listened to the coolant pipes speaking a private language, drip, hiss, sigh, and thought about the way repetition keeps a soul busy long after its body is useful. Night cycle grew thin after the collapse. The vents worked out of rhythm, as if remembering how the light went tired earlier in the corridors. I saw the lamp spirits failing, the caged glow turning the color of old blood. Children learned a new game, count the seconds between flickers, and mothers taught them to do it in their heads, not aloud. Because counting is breath, and breath is ration, and you spend both where you must. I could feel the ceiling closer. Not visibly. The bolts stared back from their holes with the same patience as always. But the air near the top of the hab block canted in a way it hadn't. It leaned toward us, a subtle suggestion. My cot began to receive the thrum of the lifts more sharply. In the sleepless hour before the next horn, I counted my inhale-exhale as if they were steps across a narrow bridge. 40, 41, 42. At 43, the pumps paused and I learned a very small fragment of eternity. The silence had weight. It pressed into the hollows under my eyes and laughed without noise. Then the backup caught, a cough in the ducts, and the world returned itself to me. I made the sign across my chest and whisper thanked the one who sets backups inside his creation. The words tasted of ash, gratitude often does. Morning was late to us. The lift cages came slow and cross, and the overseers shouted from the catwalks with a too human anger that embarrassed them. One of the intake fans above 32B had folded like a wing. The servitors were already eating it, not their mouths, but the long tools mounted in place of hands, tonguing it to pieces with a technical faith that puts mine to shame. Heat bled differently across the floor, a diagonal, and the air pitched itself higher, a whining that laid a thin film of sound across the teeth. "Blessed be the machine," our foreman said. The first words I had heard from him that day that weren't numbers. "It still lives." We echoed him. One of the echoes was mine. I listened to it return from the far pillars and felt no meaning in the sound, only the relief of having made it. The priest arrived mid-shift. 2 servitors drew his censer, an iron lung on wheels, scattering gray smoke that climbed as if exhausted by the idea of height. His robes were oiled where oiled things shouldn't be. His lenses lived where eyes had gotten tired of trying. He smelled like old copper. The censer whispered as it burned, a sound like paper learning fire. He stopped at each bench. He said, "The words you say to bless a tired body." Water touched my knuckles. I told myself it was water. "Breathe deeply, child." His machine spoke through him. "Each inhalation is proof of his mercy." I obeyed. It hurt in a way that felt righteous. He moved on with the censer's smoke, trailing him like a comet, with no interest in tails. The smell lingered after he left, a steel smell left too near faith. I thought of how often faith here must touch steel to be believed. During rest hour, we gathered as always near the coolant pipes. The droplets had turned darker since the collapse, as if the water had remembered a committal rite and kept its black. We used cups with names scored into them. The servitor assigned to the pipes had a bell around its head that chimed whenever it bent to examine a joint. Kara asked it once for a blessing. The bell chimed and oil leaked where a tear might. The foreman did not speak that hour. His lips moved with a private litany. I recognized the shape of the lines, the way a worker knows the silhouette of any tool. We ate without taste. None of us had the breath for mercy. On the walk to the lifts at shift's end, I looked up through a vent shaft where the grills had never learned to fully close, and far above it could have been a trick of distance or a story the air told me. I thought I saw a pale light, like a star, refusing to be explained. The priests preach that above the smokestacks, above the ash that keeps the hive warm, there is a sky with only one rule: look and be forgiven. I have never been forgiven by looking, but I took the sight as rumor, and rumor has kept me alive as well as bread. I touched the grate. It breathed a colder breath down on my hand. I imagined the weight of all the levels between that pale light and me. The floors of prayer, the millions of lungs computing the hour with their patient arithmetic. What color is mercy when it passes through so much iron? Does it arrive black, like our water, still sacred but unrecognizable? The ceiling does not fall by distance, it falls by time. That is the lesson the hive teaches when it trembles. Weight is a kind of eventually. In the hab block, someone had stuck sprigs of rope moss into a crack near the lamp, a green attempt. The children touched it with 2 fingers and then their foreheads, as if it were a saint's cloak. A woman had braided small purity ribbons into its threads, and as the air moved, they clicked against the wall like a quiet rosary. A man nearby had a cough with a schedule. I could predict its beat. I used it to time the washing of my hands. Scrub on the first, rinse on the second, dry on the third. Ritual saves thought, and thought is a poor thing to spend in the dark. I sat with the Vox recorder. Its case has a seam that won't hold sealant. When I press the activation stud, the device remembers my voice, the way an old friend remembers a street. Not clearly, but enough to arrive. The machine spirit inside is shy. I whisper to soothe it. I speak to a god. And then I speak to a smaller god inside a box. Both deserve courtesy. My lord, I say. The ceiling trembled today. Perhaps you felt it in whatever passes for your bones. They tell us the hive is a copy of your order. Levels, corridors, quotas, light decreasing the deeper one goes. If that is true, then you understand how every piece bears the others, how weight travels through kindness and stone. Forgive me if I ask, do you grow weary of holding us? The Vox hears me with static like rain that can't find a window. They stamped the gate with sanctioned failure. I try to hear mercy in those words. It means a wound we are permitted to keep. It means something broke, and we can pray to it now. I can almost accept that, almost. But there are cots empty tonight that will never be full again, and we have taken their numbers as our numbers, which feels like a theft with permission. I pause. The air has a new note, a faint ringing from far away, like a spoon tapping the inside of a large cup. I realize it is only the bell on the coolant servitor's head. 3 corridors over, telling the pipes it has found a problem. I hope the pipes listen. If you are listening, I say, and I still think you are. I am surprised to hear myself say, think out loud. Then let the breath that reaches us reach them also. Let us be poor together. If that is blasphemy, then it is at least a tired one. I close the Vox. The machine clicks once as if clearing its throat. The lamps dim 1 point further without warning. The ceiling states itself again with a small, professional groan. Dust falls like a benediction we did not request. Sleep is a place I arrive at reluctantly. I keep my eyes open as long as I can to make sure the world does not move while I am not watching. Eventually, the lids slide down of their own will, and the hive sings above me with its 1,000-lunged lullaby. It is not a gentle song. but it is ours. The morning horn is late again. People hold themselves in place carefully, as if rising before the note would be a betrayal of the agreed-upon fiction. When it finally arrives, longer and thinner than yesterday, we pretend the pause had a reason we understand. The corridor outside smells of rubber and wet dust. I step into it and feel a ripple underfoot. Something large and deep has changed a fraction of its mind. We pass the sealed gate on the way to the lift. A new seal has been added. The script is fine. Someone with clean hands wrote it. Loss is a hinge, it reads. Turn on it correctly. I mouth the words and find no hinge to turn on. The servo skull droops closer than before, as if the air near the gate has thickened to a syrup. It speaks its line. We bow, because bowing is another way of stealing time. At the line, a crate arrives with a different stamp. Not the usual manufactorum eagle, but a small cog beneath it. The augur on the catwalk makes the sign with 2 fingers and a whisper. We are to be careful. The shells in this crate have been read by someone who knows how to listen to metal. The foreman runs a gloved hand along the rim of the first casing and closes his eyes like a priest checking a forehead for fever. He nods once. We begin. The noise today has lost a layer. Not quite a sound cannot be less here, but narrower, as if a harmony has left on pilgrimage. I can feel the missing thickness like a draft that doesn't move. The belt jerks twice at the same place every loop. My hands adjust their timing without asking my mind. When the overseer passes overhead, I watch the red of his visor and think about blood that sees instead of flows. During rest hour, Kara sits with her back to the pipe and watches the condensate form. She tells me the trick of a long life here is to let things drip where they are going to drip. Trying to be dry is how you drown, she says. Which sounds old and true, even if it doesn't mean anything. I ask if she still dreams of the buried ones. She shakes her head with emotion, like a page being turned. They've found a different silence, she says. Not the kind we have, a better one. I envy the idea of a hierarchy of silences. Ours is the kind that still contains the schedule. The lamps shiver midway through second bell. The overseer's head snaps to the left, a gesture I have seen 100 times and never enjoyed. A servitor stumbles, its legs reconsidering. The belt stops. The belt never stops. In the stillness, our breaths arrive all at once. A surprise tide. Somewhere, a child's laugh, dry and quickly punished by its owner. Then the auxiliary kicks, a sound like a new promise being made on top of an old one, and the belt starts again, ashamed. The foreman adds a small number to the slate to pay the debt of those seconds. When I lift my eyes toward the high catwalks, I see a sliver of clean light where a maintenance hatch has been left, not open, not closed. It falls in a thin blade through the smoke. Dust dances visibly in it, each mote a pilgrim. My hands continue their work without me. I allow myself a thought I won't keep. Perhaps light is just darker air wearing a different uniform. Evening finds us as it always does. By accumulation, quota meets itself. The last shell passes my hands like a prayer concluding. We are dismissed the way a fire is dismissed. Slowly, with reminders. Out in the corridors, the smell of someone else's labor lingers. The devotional wall meets us with its soft attack of names. I put my fingers where my mother's letters almost were and fill the absence with the warmth from my hand. It is a childish thing to do. I am a child when I do it. The Emperor has room for children who are older than the hive. In the hab block, the rope moss has won a little more from the crack. Its green looks like a noise the hive forgot to make. The little ribbons rustle when the vent exhales. I sit beneath them and open the Vox recorder. The seam leaks. I press it closed with my thumb and exercise the patience of saints who do not know they are saints. My lord, I say, I am going to say something that might be untrue, and I ask that you hold me kindly while I say it. It is this. I think your mercy is heavy. The ceiling presses and we call it protection. The quotas rise and we call it diligence. The belt stops, starts, stops, and we call it a test. I will continue to call each of these things what the priests tell me. But in my chest, there is a counterword that has not learned how to speak softly. The vox hums approval or hunger. If I am wrong, correct me by breath. If I am right, forgive me by breath. If you are neither wrong nor right, because those are human, then at least breathe where I can hear you. I close the vox and put it beneath the cot, as if it were a loaf to keep overnight. The ceiling lowers itself in my imagination until I can kiss it. The lamp dims to the color of old sermons. The vents work the problem of us. I do not sleep. I am slept by the hive, which is a different thing, and when the ceiling shakes again, it does. Softly, the way a last sentence shakes before it ends, no one cries out. We have learned the etiquette of wait. Dust signs my forehead. I pretend it is ash from a holy day I missed. I breathe. That is the only proof I carry. I breathe. And the hive breathes with me. And somewhere, a sealed gate holds behind its script a congregation that does not need light. I breathe and wait for the first thin crack sound that means a beam far away has grown tired of its posture. And for once, I do not follow the sound to its inevitable story. I let it stay a sound. I let it pass. I let myself be carried by a patient air. I breathe. I wake to a new sound in the air. It isn't the pump's breath or the cough of the filters, it's a voice of metal itself, a tremor pitched so low it seems to pass through the ribs rather than the ears. The overseers told us the hive had begun its maintenance right, and that those chosen to serve near the shrine mechanisms were to report before first horn. I was one of them. They said it was an honor. Honor is a word that fits every job no one else wants. The lifts that carry us toward the central core are older than memory. Their cages are engraved with sigils whose meaning has drifted like smoke. Half of them are probably just maintenance codes mistaken for holy script. We ascend for a long time, past dozens of decks we have never seen, until the heat becomes dry instead of wet, the kind that scorches rather than suffocates. The walls change color here. The metal is cleaner, the light whiter. Even the rust seems disciplined. When the gate opens, I smell oil and incense so thick it clings to thought. The air vibrates with chanting not human, not quite machine. It's a texture, a humming lattice of sound that refuses to end. We are in the outer sanctum of the machine shrine. The tech priests stand upon platforms above the machinery. Their robes are redder than blood, cut to hide the absence of flesh beneath. From the waist down, they are all cables and pistons. Their faces glimmer with copper. The closest one turns toward us, head moving by increments too precise for neck muscles. His voice comes through a grill, flattened by static. Praise be to the Omnissiah who dreams the machine awake. We kneel. The metal floor burns the knees, but no one moves. A servitor drifts between us, sprinkling droplets of what they call sacred oil. It smells of iron and salt. The droplets hiss on our skin. The priest continues, tone without inflection. Your task is proximity. You will clean. You will listen. You will not interpret what you hear. He gestures toward the great engine that fills the chamber, an edifice of pipes and spinning gears whose upper reaches vanish into fog. Red light drips from somewhere above, catching on the edges of brass. It looks less built than grown, as if the hive had sprouted a spine to carry its own weight. We bow again, and the servitors hand us brushes made of metal filament. The sound they make on the pipes is like whispering teeth. The first day near the machine is a kind of revelation. Everything breathes here, but differently. The air vibrates at a rhythm that overtakes your heartbeat until you can't tell which is which. Sometimes the hum rises until it becomes a chorus of pure tone that makes the skin crawl with holiness. The priests call it the spirit's exhalation. They bow whenever it happens, their mechanical limbs clicking like rosary beads. I bow too, but for different reasons. The sound makes me dizzy, and kneeling helps me not to fall. We clean until the lamps shift from white to crimson. The engine never stops. It moves with the patience of the cosmos, slow and perfect. I run the brush along the side of a vent large enough to swallow a room. My reflection swims across the metal. Distorted, multiplied. For a heartbeat I see more faces than mine. Then the light flickers, and they are gone. When we return to the lower levels, we bring the smell of the shrine with us. The others step aside in the corridors, as if the oil on our robes might burn them. Some reach out to touch the stains for blessing, others avert their eyes. In the manufactorum, superstition and sanctity are the same shape, only facing different directions. That night, the vents whisper differently. I record the change on my vox. My lord, today I worked near your engines. They sang a song without breath. I do not understand the words, but they moved through me like command. If you and the Omnissiah share a voice, then I have heard it. It is not like ours. It does not care if we understand. By the fourth day, the humming finds a pattern in my skull. It plays behind every thought. Even the rhythm of my breath begins to match it. The others feel it too. We speak less now. Silence helps us listen. The priest notices. He leans close to me while the machine roars behind him. "You hear it," he says through the vox grill. More observation than question. That is good. Hearing precedes obedience. I almost ask what we are obeying, but his head turns away before the thought becomes sound. Later, when he leaves, I stand near one of the smaller conduits where the air rushes warm and constant. If I press my ear to the pipe, I can almost make out words inside the wind, fragments of prayers spoken backwards, numbers repeated like promises. Once, very faintly, I hear my own name, followed by a pause long enough to be recognition. I pull back, heart hammering. Faith is easy when silence stays still. It is harder when it starts talking back. 2 workers in our group vanish after the 6th day. Their tools are left by the pipes, neatly arranged. The overseer says they were transferred upward, closer to the core. We nod and continue brushing. At rest hour, Kara whispers that no one comes back from upward. Her voice sounds dry, scraped thin. Upward is where the machines remember you differently, she says. Up there, you stop being skin and start being pattern. She laughs after saying it, as though to soften the heresy. But the laugh doesn't fit her mouth anymore. The engine begins to change its rhythm on the 8th day. The tone drops lower, closer to the pulse of the world. The tech priests respond with new chants, binary bursts that sound like rain on metal. The air trembles visibly. Sparks fall like orange snow. We are told not to shield our eyes. The sparks are blessings. I obey, but one lands on my wrist and sears through the cloth. The burn smells sweet. For hours afterward, the spot pulses in time with the machine. When I sleep, I dream of a vast heart beating behind the hive's walls, each contraction shaking the city like a lung inhaling stars. I wake whispering the hum. One shift later, they order us to attend the litany of alignment. It happens at the lowest part of the shrine, where the great conduits converge. The space is circular, lit by blue fire. The air there feels alive enough to bruise. The priests stand in a ring around a column of light that rises from the floor, a beam of plasma feeding upward into infinity. Inside the light, something moves, too bright to see, but moving nonetheless. Behold the breath of the Omnissiah, one of them intones. Behold the voice that never falters. We kneel. The heat presses against the skin, then through it. I can feel every scar and seam on my body react. The smell of ozone fills the lungs until it's impossible to know if I'm breathing or burning. The priests begin their chant. It's half prayer, half equation. Between the words, the machine hum replies. I realize they are conversing. And for one instant, one moment of perfect balance, I understand the sound. Not the meaning, but the shape of meaning. It says, I do not forget what serves me. When we are dismissed, my legs refuse to stand. The servitor beside me drags me up with careful claws. Its face is a mask of melted wax and metal, one human eye still intact. It blinks slowly at me, as if remembering the trick. Gratitude, I whisper. The word feels foreign in the throat. Its vox clicks twice in answer, almost the rhythm of a heartbeat. Back in the hab that night, I cannot sleep. The hum is inside the walls and inside my chest. I try to pray, but the words break apart. The spaces between them hum back at me, filling the silence with machinery. I turn on the Vox recorder. My lord, I do not know if I am speaking to you or to it. They say the Omnissiah is your other face. If that is true, then your faces disagree. One breathes, one vibrates, one forgives, one computes. Which one hears us? Which one dreams the hive alive? The Vox stutters. The static sounds, suspiciously like breathing. Today, a spark blessed me. It left a mark that does not heal. It pulses when I think of you. If this is the sign of favor, then I will bear it. If it is infection, I will still bear it. Either way, it is proof that I am heard. I stop the recording. The vents whisper my name again. Only once. I do not answer. Weeks pass. The shrine's light changes color with the seasons of the engine: red, white, then gold. We learn to tell time by sound alone. Sometimes the machine grows quiet, and in that quiet I feel terror. Stillness is not meant for this place. Kara's brush lies abandoned now. They said she went upward as well. I hope she found her silence. I keep working. My skin darkens with oil. The burn on my wrist hums faintly under the surface, a memory that won't fade. Sometimes, when the priests recite the binary canticles, I hear words in my own language hidden between the clicks. Serve. Stay. 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 One night, while cleaning near a conduit that glows with inner lightning, I catch my reflection again. The light around it shimmers as if underwater. For a heartbeat, my mouth moves after my reflections does. Then the hum surges, drowning everything. When I blink, the reflection doesn't return. Later, during final bell, the priest approaches me. His metal fingers trace the air above the burn on my wrist. "The machine remembers you," he says. "Do not disappoint it." I want to ask what disappointment means to a thing that cannot die, but my throat closes before the sound forms. He turns away, gears hissing. The hum swells. The machines breathe, and I breathe with them. I smelled warmth before I ever saw it. That was how it began, not with light, but with a scent that didn't belong to the hive. It drifted through the vents during the second rest hour. Faint and impossible, dry air, touched with something sweet, like dust that had never known oil. The others didn't notice, or they pretended not to. Down here you learn to mistrust anything pleasant. The Emperor tests the faithful by giving them comfort to resist. Still, I lifted my mask for a heartbeat and breathed. It was gone almost instantly, swallowed by the smoke, but it left a shape behind in my mind, a color that wasn't black. A new worker joined our line that cycle. His name was Solon, though he pronounced it with the round vowels of the upper decks. He was too clean, his mask new, his hands unscarred. The overseer said he'd come from a collapsed section near the mid-spire. That explained the accent, but not the way he looked at the lamps, as if comparing them to something brighter. He worked beside me for a week before he spoke. When he did, it was in a whisper. "You ever wonder what the sky looks like?" I told him I'd heard sermons, that it was gold with the Emperor's fire. He shook his head. "Not sermons. The real thing. There is a rule down here. When someone begins talking like that, you either walk away or you make the sign of the Aquila until they stop. I did neither. I just kept bolting shells and let him keep speaking. I saw it once," he said, "before they sealed the shaft. I was working a lift core that reached almost to the surface. There was a breach. Sunlight came through, not lamplight, not reactor glow. It was alive. It burned, but it didn't hurt." He stopped then, maybe expecting laughter. None came. The hum of the line filled the silence between us. "Maybe you dreamed it," I said. He smiled, a small, patient curve of lips that didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe, but I woke up warm." After that, he talked more, always quietly. He described how the air near the breach had moved on its own, without vents, how it smelled of nothing, how it made shadows honest. "It changes color," he said one rest hour, eyes half closed as if remembering. "The same light, but it changes. Can you imagine a thing like that? I couldn't." The lamps here have two moods, working and broken. The thought of light that decides made me uneasy. Still, I found myself listening. His stories filled the same space that used to hold prayer. The priests didn't like him. You could feel it. They came down more often now, swinging censers that smoked too sweet, blessing the air until we coughed. One of them pulled me aside after shift. His voice filtered through the Vox grill. "The one beside you speaks of things not meant for below. Do not let him trade you curiosity for faith." I nodded. I even repeated the proper verse. "The Emperor's light burns where it is needed, not where it is wanted." But later, lying on my cot, I replayed Solon's words in my mind: alive light, moving air, warmth that forgives. If that was heresy, it was a gentle one. The next cycle, a rumor spread through the manufactorum. A worker from another section had been taken upward for illumination. No one knew what that meant. The word sounded holy, but left a metallic taste. Solon heard the whisper and laughed under his breath. "They think light kills. Maybe it only shows." That laugh stayed with me. Down here, laughter feels like a fragile machine, something that shouldn't work but sometimes does. On the 10th night, the vents carried that same strange scent again. Faint but real. Solon smelled it first. He looked up, eyes wide. "Do you feel it?" he asked. Before I could answer, the horn sounded a deep note that meant power redistribution. The lamps dimmed to blood red. The air thickened, vibrating with low energy. In the half-dark, the expression on his face changed. Awe, yes, but also longing. He leaned close and whispered, "It's near. The warmth. It's coming through again." His hand brushed mine, a simple thing, but his skin was warm, warmer than it should have been. I pulled away, startled. He smiled, like someone remembering a secret. That night, I recorded for the first time in days. "My lord, there is a man who says he has seen the sun. He speaks of warmth as though it loves him. I don't know whether to envy or fear him. If his words are false, forgive him. If they are true, then why have you hidden such light from us? What lesson requires darkness to be endless?" The vox clicked softly in reply. A little static sigh. It sounded almost like laughter. On the 12th cycle, the priests came again, this time with servitors bearing holy projectors. They cast light across the walls, not bright, but symbolically shaped. The double-headed eagle outlined in smoke. The sermon was about humility. Those who dwell below support the faith of those above. Envy is corrosion. Solon didn't bow. He kept working, face hidden behind his mask. I wanted to tell him to kneel, but I didn't. When the priest noticed, he simply turned the censer toward us and let the smoke roll over our bench. The smell was like burnt wax and bitterness. After they left, Solon whispered, "They fear warmth because they can't control it." I pretended not to hear. 2 shifts later, the air system stuttered again. The fans above us stopped mid-rotation, a perfect stillness that lasted 3 full breaths. When they resumed, the smell returned stronger, dry, clear, alive. The workers looked up in confusion. Even the overseer paused. A voice came over the vox horn, thin with static. "Remain at stations. All is within tolerance." But it wasn't. I could feel it, a pressure behind the walls, like light trying to remember how to shine. Solon looked at me, eyes bright. "Do you hear it?" he asked. I listened. The usual hum was gone. In its place, silence pulsed, not absence, but waiting. "It's breathing differently," I said. He nodded. "It's dreaming of the sun." That night he didn't come back to the hab. His cot was empty, his tools still lined in perfect order. No one spoke his name at roll call. The overseer said nothing. Absence here is just another shift in the numbers. I went to the devotional wall and traced the new rust that had spread across it. The metal was warm under my fingers. For a moment I thought I saw light flicker beneath it, faint as memory. That was when I began to dream in color. I dreamt of him first as a shadow walking through light. Not the pale red that leaks from the hive lamps, but a white, so full of warmth it carried weight. He was moving upward through it, as if climbing a river made of day. When he turned, the light went through him. It used him to see. He smiled and said a single word that I could not keep when I woke, only the echo of it, round and clean, a word shaped for a mouth that had never tasted dust. I woke with the taste of metal and the hum of the fans returning. The vents were breathing the same tired rhythm again, but beneath it I could still feel the ghost of that warmth, like sunlight printed on the inside of my eyelids. I whispered a thank you that wasn't quite prayer, then another that was. Work resumed as always. The overseers said nothing about Solon. The line never makes room for the gone. Still, I kept expecting to hear his voice in the noise, that patient cadence describing brightness. Instead, there was only the machine's endless repetition, the click and hiss that used to comfort me but now sounded like the hive pretending to be alive. During rest hour, Kara leaned close. "You knew the dreamer," she said. "They found his mask near a ventilation shaft. No blood, no soot, just the smell of something clean." She looked afraid of the word clean. That night, the priests increased the incense until the air turned thick as syrup. One shouted above the smoke, "Darkness is devotion. Light is arrogance." The others answered, "We live to hide the radiance of the Emperor's mercy." I repeated the words, but they felt wrong, like breathing backward. A few cycles later, the vent above my cot began to leak warmth again, steady now, like the pulse of some great animal. I sat beneath it until my skin prickled. The air smelled faintly of stone and something I had no name for. I wanted to believe it was him, the dreamer, climbing through the ducts like a hymn seeking a mouth. I told myself I was only listening, not hoping. Hope is the first heresy that grows in darkness. It roots where faith cracks. The manufactorum changed after that. The heat rose subtly, the lamps flickered more often, and workers began to move slower, as if waiting for a signal. During one shift, a beam of light broke through a seam above line 32B, no thicker than a wire. It cut across the smoke and dust, a trembling column of gold. The overseer froze mid-stride. The sound of the whole line faltered. No one moved for 3 breaths. Then, as one, we knelt. It was instinct, not rebellion. We knelt because the light looked alive, because it reached down like a hand trying to remember touch. The overseer shouted for containment teams, but his voice cracked. The beam widened a fraction, and for a moment the color of everything changed. Metal looked young. Rust turned to ember. Even the air had texture. Then the emergency shutters slammed closed, and darkness returned so suddenly it felt personal. Someone began to cry softly. Someone else whispered, "It's the Emperor. He's seen us." The overseer's rod struck the floor once. "He sees all," he said, and his voice broke on the last word. That night, I dreamed again. The hive was gone, replaced by a plain of ash. Above it, a sun rose, red at first, then gold, then white so bright it erased the edges of everything. I heard Solon's voice say, "It's not a place, it's a direction." When I woke, the burn on my wrist once the machine's mark had warmed, as if remembering the same dream. The next morning, the priests called an emergency sermon. They declared that unauthorized light had entered the hive and must be purged. "False illumination is the mask of chaos," they said. They ordered a shutdown of all upper vents and forbade talk of warmth. We obeyed outwardly. Inwardly, the silence changed its flavor. People began to whisper new prayers that ended not with "the Emperor protects," but "the light remembers." I did not join them. I could not decide which frightened me more, that Solon's sun was real, or that it wasn't. The warmth kept returning, irregular, like breath through a wounded lung. Sometimes it carried a sound soft, distant, almost melodic. I told myself it was pressure in the ducts, a harmonic in the metal. But one night, when the vents sighed, I thought I heard my name again, drawn out as if spoken through air rather than across it. I whispered back before I could stop myself. "I'm still here." The vent answered with silence, then with a small cascade of warm dust that settled over my hands. Each grain shimmered faintly before fading. Days blurred. The work became dreamlike. I could no longer tell if the heat I felt was from furnaces or memory. My bolts aligned themselves. My hands moved with mechanical grace. I began to see color even when the lamps were red ghost hues swimming beneath the surface of things, as though the world had been painted once and forgotten. Kara watched me carefully. "You've been touched," she said one rest hour. "Be careful. The machine takes those who see too much, or the light does. Hard to tell which side owns the seeing." I told her I wasn't touched, just tired. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Fatigue doesn't hum under the skin. Revelation does. On the 20th night since Solon vanished, I went to the devotional wall. The rusted names gleamed faintly, as if lit from within. I traced his name. Someone had carved it there, crude but legible, and felt heat rise through the metal. A faint glow outlined each letter, the same gold I had seen through the shutter. For a heartbeat, I believed I could see the path he'd taken. Upward, through layers of steel and faith, toward that forbidden brightness. I spoke aloud, breaking the hive's first rule. "If you found the sun, remember us." The metal pulsed once, answering like a slow heartbeat. Then the glow died. I returned to my cot, the hum of the vents following like a lullaby grown uncertain. I opened the Vox recorder. The seam had finally cracked. The machine spirit inside flickered like a candle. I whispered into it anyway. "My lord, you gave us warmth once, and we built walls to hide it. Now the walls leak. I don't know if this light belongs to you, or to the machine, or to the dreamer who found a place between, but I have felt it, and it forgives. If that is heresy, then heresy is softer than faith." Static filled the pause, long and slow, then resolved into a faint tone, the same pitch the hive uses when the air systems restart after failure. It sounded like breath. "If you hear me," I said, "teach me which to worship. The hand that burns, or the one that covers the flame." I shut the Vox. Outside, the ceiling trembled. Dust rained down, glowing for an instant before vanishing into shadow. For the first time, I hoped the hive would one day break open, not to destroy, but to let something through. I lay awake until the pumps resumed their weary song. The warmth faded from the air, but the color remained behind my eyes. When sleep finally found me, it was bright. I do not remember when the hum changed. I only know that it did. At first, it was a flaw too small to name, a thinness in the air between breaths, a tremor that didn't belong to the pumps. Then the light began to pulse out of time with the sound. We pretended not to notice. Pretending is part of the creed here. For 3 days, the lamps flickered, turning red, then white, then a color that had no name. The foreman said the circuits were being blessed again, that the Omnissiah's current was learning a new path. We nodded and returned to work. But each pulse of light felt like the hive blinking, uncertain whether to keep its eyes open. On the 4th day, the first horn failed. Silence came where there should have been the long metallic cry that marks the beginning of shift. For half a minute, no one moved. When the second horn sounded late and wrong, people exhaled together. The echo of that breath filled the hall like prayer. The machines slowed. Conveyor belts that had never known mercy hesitated, caught, resumed. The overseers called for calm, their voices breaking the way light breaks on oil. We obeyed, but the rhythm was gone. Without rhythm, work feels like memory, something the body performs out of obligation, not conviction. By the end of the shift, the heat had dropped. The vents sighed, colder air, and the smell of the place changed. Not rust or incense, but damp stone, like the hive remembering its bones. The red lamps above line 32B dimmed until the brass shells on the belt gleamed only faintly, small moons moving through shadow. Kira whispered, "It's breathing out too much." I asked what she meant. "The hive," she said. "It's letting go." That night, the upper duct stopped completely. The silence that followed was not the absence of sound, but its corpse. You could feel it pressing against your chest. People woke without knowing why, sitting up on their cots, listening to the air that would not come. Then the backup pumps started weak, uneven, coughing like an old man finding his voice. A cheer rose from a dozen throats, quickly smothered when we realized how small the sound was. I caught myself whispering the morning creed in the dark. His mercy is in the breath. It felt like theft, saying it while the machine gasped. The next cycle, the priests came with portable lamps. Their light was steady, too steady, as if drawn from somewhere that didn't belong to the hive. They told us the failing circuits were a test. "In darkness, the Emperor recognizes his truest servants," they said. But their hands trembled when they raised the sensors, and the smoke coiled downward instead of up. By the 6th day, the upper levels had lost power entirely. Rumors filtered down, streets of glass gone black, cog shrines silent, entire manufactoria sealed to keep the cold in. Someone claimed to have seen light leaking from the ceiling again, a seam glowing like a wound, but no one dared check. Our section kept working as long as the belts moved. The overseers stopped counting quotas. They only counted hours. I began to think of time not as something that moved forward, but as something that collected a sediment of repetition, layering itself until it collapsed. The burn on my wrist, once warm, cooled. The hum that used to live under my skin retreated deeper, as if ashamed. I wanted to speak into the vox, but the little machine's light had gone out. I told myself the spirit inside was sleeping. Machines are allowed to rest. People are not. Rest hour became a gathering of silhouettes. No one lit the coolant pipes anymore. We sat in the dark, listening to water fall through unseen cracks. Someone began to hum the old litany of function, softly, almost a lullaby. Others joined, their voices thin but steady. The melody rose through the floor like steam. For a moment, the hive sang to itself. When the song ended, no one spoke. We all heard it at once, a faint knocking from deep below, irregular, patient, not the sound of machinery, something slower, like fingers testing the strength of a wall. Kara crossed herself 3 times. "It's the buried ones," she whispered. "They've remembered us." The foreman told us to ignore it. "Echoes," he said. "The hive has a long memory." He smiled as he said it, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. When the lights finally failed completely, it wasn't sudden. One by one, they surrendered, each flicker a confession. The last lamp above our bench burned blue for an instant, a small, impossible sky, and then it was gone. We stood in total dark. The silence returned, heavier now, thick with the sound of our own hearts. Someone sobbed once, a dry sound that didn't find breath to finish. The overseer's vox crackled. "Remain at stations." The Emperor observes devotion in shadow. No one moved, but everyone listened, hoping to hear the next sentence. It didn't come. The vox hissed, then died. I do not know how long we worked after that. Time lost edges. The belt moved because we pushed it by hand. Sparks from friction became our stars. The shells glowed faintly where heat still lingered. My hands bled, but the darkness hid it. And without sight, pain feels almost holy. At some point, the pumps began to whisper again, a thin thread of air. Each breath felt borrowed. I thought of Solon and his son, and wondered if the hive was finally dreaming of him, exhaling the last of its night. It is strange how quickly darkness learns our names. Within the first days of total failure, we had already adjusted to it, moving by memory, speaking only in breaths, We discovered that the air itself made a sound when we turned our heads, a soft hiss of fabric and flesh through stale wind. It became a map. The hive taught us to see with ears, to measure distance by echo. For a while it felt like we had been granted another sense rather than stripped of one. But the sense lied. It made the world too close. Every whisper came from beside the ear. Every movement felt like a hand brushing the shoulder. After a time, I began to imagine the shape of things that might not be there, figures made from sound alone. The priests stopped coming. Their lamps went first, then their voices. We found the censer they had used for the last blessing, still smoking faintly. The incense had turned to a dark wax that clung to the floor and smelled like old blood. Kara said that when light dies, faith goes looking for it. "They've gone upward," she told me. "That's where all belief goes when it wants to burn." I envied them, not their courage. Without the overseers, the line dissolved. Work became personal, each of us keeping motion for the sake of motion, afraid that stillness would make the air forget us. The sound of bolts tightening became a kind of heartbeat. I listened to it and told myself it belonged to the Emperor. The burn on my wrist flared again. Weak but rhythmic. I held it close to my ear and imagined it whispering orders. It didn't hurt. It pulsed like a memory of warmth. Faint reassurance that something beyond the dark still remembered I existed. One night, I think it was night, Kara took my hand and pressed it to the wall. "Listen," she said. I did. The metal was cold but alive, carrying a pulse of its own. Slow, enormous, like a tide against rock. Between each pulse there was a gap where you could almost hear voices. Hundreds, maybe thousands, murmuring in the language of air. I could not tell if they were praying or warning. People began to disappear, not taken, not dragged away, just gone. You would speak to someone, turn your head, and when you looked back, the space they occupied had become another shadow. The hive never made noise when it consumed, it simply reclaimed the room. The foreman vanished during a maintenance inspection. His tablet lay beside the open duct, still glowing faintly. On its screen, a single line repeated in static script. "The system breathes." I copied the words into the wall with a bolt. They seemed important, though I didn't know why. When the first real light returned, it came from below. A slow orange pulse, deep and patient, painting the walls like a sunrise underfoot. Some said it was magma, some said reactor bleed, some said salvation. We followed it through the corridors until the air grew too hot to breathe. The heat smelled of metal and salt. It filled our lungs until we coughed flame without fire. Kara collapsed beside me, laughing between breaths. "It's him," she said. "The dreamer. He's opened the floor." But the glow faded as we watched, dimming until nothing remained but a smear of rust on the wall. The laughter stopped. She never spoke again. I returned alone. The hab block had changed. The vents were silent, the air motionless. My cot lay in a drift of ash that hadn't been there before. I knelt and touched it. It was warm for a moment, then cooled under my hand. When I lifted my palm, the outline remained like a mark of ownership. I took out the Vox recorder. It flickered once, reluctant. The sound of its dying spark filled the room. I whispered into it anyway. "My lord, the lights have failed. The air waits for command. The hive has forgotten its rhythm, but my heart has learned another. If this darkness is your will, teach me how to live inside it. If it is your silence, teach me to be quiet enough to hear." Static answered, slow, rolling, almost tender. It sounded like the sea described in ancient prayers, a vast body that moves without permission. I imagined that somewhere within that static a voice might exist, small and calm, counting our remaining breaths. "I remember warmth," I told it. "I remember a man who dreamed of the sun. If he reached you, breathe through him for us. Let one light remain, even if it burns unseen." The recorder whined, then went still. Its eye dimmed. I laid it beside the cot, a relic without blessing. I don't know how long the darkness has lasted. Time here is measured by heartbeat, and mine is slow. Sometimes the air trembles, promising the return of light, but the promise never arrives. Other times I think I see faint glows in the ash, small as insects, pulsing in rhythm with breath. Maybe that's all light is, breath made visible. When I sleep, I dream of the hive above me as a lung that has forgotten how to fill itself. In those dreams I stand inside it, holding my hand against the wall, whispering, "Breathe," until it listens. When I wake, my lips are dry and the wall feels warm. I do not pray for salvation anymore. I pray for motion. I pray that the hive keeps breathing, even if it no longer knows our names. And when the last lamp flickers somewhere in the unseen distance, I tell myself that the Emperor is not leaving. He is only closing his eyes to rest. Faith has to pretend that gods can sleep. I breathe. The air enters like memory and leaves like forgiveness. The lights fail again. I keep working in the dark. The first hunger was quiet. It began as a small delay in the ration alarms, 10 extra minutes between the sound of permission and the opening of the dispensers. 10 minutes can hold an eternity when the stomach remembers better days. We queued as always, masks tight, bowls in hand. When the shutters rose, the air behind them smelled different. No oil, no nutrient, steam. Only the faint odor of metal cooled too fast. Inside the slots lay handfuls of gray powder where once there had been paste. The overseer said the mixture was concentrated sustenance. We swallowed it dry and pretended to be nourished. The second hunger spoke louder. Voices rose in the corridors, quiet petitions, then questions, then the rustle of feet searching where feet had never been allowed to wander. The priests were gone, the overseers too. Only the distant machinery still labored, somewhere above, as if feeding itself. I had forgotten what it was to feel empty in so many ways at once, lungs thin, heart slow, thoughts small. Hunger makes prayer short and true. I found myself whispering without meaning to. His mercy is in the breath, but breath, too, was becoming ration. Kara had once said that when the machine tires of its servants, it lets them starve so that they might feed the walls with their stillness. I think she was right. The air around the manufactorum had grown sharp, tasting of stone dust and absence. The few of us left gathered near the coolant pipes, though no coolant flowed there now. The floor beneath them had gone hot, radiating the slow fever of the hive's deeper heart. The heat made us drowsy. Hunger made us still. We spoke little. When we did, it was of direction. Upward, someone said. Always upward. The higher decks still eat. Another answered. The Emperor tests us here. If we leave, we fail. Both voices sounded the same, dry, cracked, undecided. I thought of the warmth I'd felt in the vents weeks ago. Of Solin's sun, of light moving on its own. I said nothing. Hope is heavier than hunger. That night, a sound came from the far corridors. Not metal, not engine, but many feet moving in careful rhythm. We went to see. A procession was forming. Dozens of workers, then hundreds, all carrying what little remained: tools, rags, relics of broken machines. At the front walked a child with a lantern whose fuel had almost run out. The flame was small, sickly blue, but it was flame. Behind her, people sang in low tones, a melody without words. They said they were going to find the light above, that the Emperor had opened the paths to test their faith. The ceiling has cracks, one man told me, eyes wild with fasting. I've seen the glow bleed through. No one commanded them. The procession simply decided itself. Those who could no longer work followed. Those too weak to walk stayed behind. Faces turned toward the floor as if ashamed to be still. I watched them pass for a long time before joining. I don't know if it was faith or starvation that moved me. Sometimes they are the same thing. We traveled upward through the maintenance shafts, guided by faint drafts of warmer air. The walls there were different rough stone, half swallowed by metal, veins of rust glowing faintly in the dark. Every 100 steps someone would collapse, and the rest would lift them or step around them. The hymn continued, softer each time. At first, we spoke of light as destination. Later, we spoke of it as promise. By the third day, we spoke only of motion. The air thinned. We tore rags from our sleeves to cover our mouths, though none had the strength to complain about the smell anymore. When we found condensation on the walls, we licked it like sacrament. I lost count of the levels. Each ascent felt the same. Narrow stairs, faded glyphs of maintenance orders turned wholly by exhaustion. Then another gate to force open. Some gates were sealed with parchment seals that crumbled at touch, others welded by time. We broke them all. The Emperor would forgive. Necessity is its own liturgy. On what might have been the 5th day, we reached a shaft so wide it seemed to hold its own weather. Cold mist rose from below. Faint light glimmered above like a ceiling of dying stars. The child with the lantern held it high. The flame bent upward, drawn by unseen air. "There," she said. "It breathes." We began to climb the ladder fixed to the wall, one by one, slow and deliberate. The iron rungs were slick with condensation. Halfway up, someone slipped. They did not scream. The fall was too long for noise. We paused, waited for the sound of impact, but none came. The shaft swallowed everything. I looked down once and saw only fog. I looked up and saw a single beam of pale light spilling from a crack far above. It was enough. We climbed. By the time we reached the next platform, the group had thinned. The child's lantern finally died, but she didn't cry. She looked at her empty hands as though holding the ghost of the flame. Someone murmured, "She carries it inside now," and we all agreed. We rested there, if rest can exist without sleep. The platform was lined with old cogitator banks, their screens dark. A single servitor sat among them, motionless. Its face was gone, replaced by a blank metal plate. We thought it dead until it spoke. Directive. Continue upward. The voice was dry, static, half-broken, but we took it for command. Even machines can be prophets when you are starving. We rose and walked again. None of us looked back. Looking back is for those who expect to return. We kept moving until the floors began to change. The metal underfoot was smoother here, the grime thinner, the air almost sweet. It frightened us. We were creatures of soot. Purity felt like exposure. There were murals on the walls, saints of the manufactoria, men and women painted in oil and ash. Eyes turned upward toward a gold they could never reach. Time had flaked their faces away so that only the gestures remained. Open palms, bent knees, mouths shaped around silence. Someone in the procession began to laugh. "They're praying for us," he said. The sound of his laughter made the air ripple. The walls groaned and shed dust in reply. The higher we went, the less the hive sounded like itself. The machine's deep pulse had faded to a memory. In its place was wind, real wind, sighing down through cracks in the ceiling. It carried with it a smell none of us could name, cold, vast, alive. On the 7th day, the rations ran out entirely. We chewed cloth to fool our mouths, sipped condensation from the pipes. The child collapsed. I carried her until my arms shook, then passed her to another. "Upward," we said whenever someone faltered. It was no longer a direction but a word that meant continue. We came to a door sealed with wax and scripture. The seals were newer than the others. The wax still red. Across the top was a phrase in High Gothic, "Non intrabis lumen impurum, the impure shall not enter the light." Someone whispered, "That means it's real." We tore the seals away. The door resisted, then yielded with a sigh that smelled of forgotten air. Beyond it was a hall vast enough to contain a cathedral. The ceiling was invisible, lost in shadow. At its center stood a column of light descending from somewhere above, narrow as a spear, bright enough to hurt the eyes. Around it lay hundreds of shapes, too still to be living. Pilgrims, perhaps, who had reached this far and mistaken stillness for ascension. The procession halted. No one spoke. The light hummed, faintly, a sound like breath drawn inward and never released. The child stirred in my arms and whispered, "It's warm. Be kin." I stepped forward. The light painted the dust gold. It was not like the machine's glow or the lamp's weary red. This light felt curious, as if studying us. Each step nearer stripped a layer of cold from my skin. I could feel my heart answering it, slow and open. A voice behind me said, "It's a reactor leak." Another said, "It's the Emperor." I think both were right. I placed the child at the edge of the light. Her eyes widened. "It's like breathing," she said, and she walked into it. She didn't vanish. She simply brightened. The light folded around her, lifting the shadow from her face. She turned back once, smiled a small, forgiving smile, and then the light filled the space where she had been. The crowd broke. Some ran forward, others fell to their knees. I stood still. The warmth on my face was unbearable and perfect. I felt the hive trembling beneath us, metal sighing, pipes expanding as if exhaling after a long sleep. For the first time in my life, the air moved on its own. When I finally stepped into the light, it wasn't courage that moved me, but fatigue. I wanted to stop being cold. The brightness wrapped around me like water. Every scar, every bruise, every memory of darkness sang once and dissolved. I saw Solon there, or thought I did, his face turned upward, eyes reflecting gold. Behind him rose the shapes of machines and saints, all bathed in the same colorless warmth. The hum grew louder until it was all there was. The last thing I remember thinking was that the light wasn't coming from above. It was breathing out from within the hive itself, as if the Emperor had always been here, asleep under our feet, dreaming of daylight. When I woke, the hall was empty. The light remained, but fainter, pulsing gently like a heart. I stood in it alone. The hunger was gone. My skin glowed dimly, dust rising from it like incense smoke. I didn't feel alive or dead, only continuous. I spoke into the silence. "My lord, I have walked through your shadow and found you dreaming beneath it. The poor have carried you in their lungs all this time. We are your breath, exhaled into darkness, so you might hear yourself alive." The light flickered once, a single golden blink, and I understood that was answer enough. I breathed. The air moved with me. The hive shuddered, as if taking its first breath after long sleep. Somewhere far below, the machines began to sing again. I do not step out of the light. The light steps into me. It moves like slow water through the ribs, like a breath that keeps deciding to continue. I stand where the column falls from the unseen ceiling, and I feel my weight loosen, as if the floor has forgiven me for standing on it. The hum that lived in the hive rises until it is no longer sound but texture, a lattice pressed softly against the skin. I try to pray and find that the prayer begins before my mouth does, as if the light already knows the shape of my words and is only reminding me of them. Around the hall, the shadows hold their positions like obedient choir boys. They seem less like the absence of light and more like its patience. I close my eyes. The brightness remains. I open them. The brightness remains. With eyes or without, it is the same, which means it is not sight I am using, but some older sense that the dust has been guarding for me all these years. I speak a name that might be the Emperor's and might be the hive's. The echo returns warm. "If you are here," I say, "speak where air can hear." The answer arrives first as change, not speech. Then widens, like lungs testing their range. Within that motion, a tone appears, pure and undecorated, a single line drawn through silence. It seems to touch the bones behind the ears. I recognize it, not the note itself, but the discipline inside it. It is the rhythm of quotas, the patience of pistons, the promise the pumps make every morning when they remember to breathe. It is also softer than all those things. It contains room. I think of Solon, the man who dreamed of the sun, and for a moment I feel him near, not as a body but as warmth that chooses a shape. You were right, I whisper to the air, and the air agrees by not arguing. I step forward until the light grips the edges of my clothes and irons the soot into a uniform. My hands rise without my permission. The burn on my wrist once the machine's mark glows like an ember remembering fire. The hum climbs, becomes 2 notes, then 3. Then a chord that does not move the way human music does. It opens rather than proceeds, the way prayer does when it is heard. Say what you are, I ask, though I already know that is the wrong request. Names are for sorting. This is for joining. The tone changes again, not louder, closer. It sits against the heart. Inside it, a phrase forms, no consonants, no breath, just the shape of intention, and I understand without hearing. I have been your heir. The words make no shock in me. They arrive like a fact I have always lived with but never learned to say. The light does not claim to be the emperor, nor deny it. It does not claim to be machine, nor dismiss it. It is simpler, a presence that has chosen a method. We have been breathing it, and it has been breathing us. I say the morning creed out of habit, his mercy is in the breath, and for the first time the sentence feels literal. The light holds the syllables gently until they lose their corners and return to pulse. A footstep sounds at the edge of the hall, the careful tread of someone deciding whether they are welcome. I do not turn. The light does not dim. After a long moment, the step withdraws. We are left to our conversation. Will you answer questions? I ask. The brightness leans in, like a candle listening. Did we suffer for a reason? I say, and feel the childishness inside the courage. There is no reply I can put into words. Instead, the hum descends into a slow wave that travels through the floor, up the ankles, along the calves, finding the knee, the hip, the spine. I am remembered, bone by bone. The wave returns to the chest and rests there. The meaning is not yes or no, but something like, you were not alone inside the waiting. Tears come, a quiet proof the body keeps for when language fails. They are warm in a way I do not associate with sorrow. They smell faintly of iron. I let them fall into the light. The light accepts them without ceremony, the way a lung accepts air it did not choose. Then speak to the others, I say, and the request makes me feel taller than I am. There were so many of us who did not hear. The ceiling fell. The quotas rose. The lamps failed. Speak to them now. The brightness answers with a stillness so complete I understand it must be effort. Then, from far corridors, I hear 1,000 small sounds begin at once. Vents turning with new manners, duct grills whispering like prayer flags, ancient cogitators clearing their throats. The hive tries again. Not perfectly, not as before, but with intention. It is enough to be a beginning. I step out of the column. The warmth lingers on my skin like a patient hand. The hall is wider than I remember. The outlines of those who came before, pilgrims sleeping in neat rows of dust, soften at the edges, as if some of their shape has been asked to stand. At the far wall, a small panel has unclasped itself. Behind it, a maintenance passage glows the way metal does when it has recently learned a secret. I understand the invitation without thinking. Take the light with you by giving it something to move through. I am not a priest. I am only someone who has learned to speak slowly. That is enough. I walk the passage. The glow follows like a good listener. My shadow practices keeping pace with me. It fails and does not mind. Each step becomes a syllable in a sentence the hive writes through my body. At a junction I hear voices thin, hungry, frightened of their own echo. The procession that survived has folded itself into a corner of the world and is trying to be smaller than the dark. I call softly. Names answer. Then hands. then faces shining with a poverty that has turned from shame to honesty. There is warmth, I tell them, and the words feel dangerous and accurate. It is not above, it is not below, it is where we agree to breathe. The child who carried the lantern is not among them. For a second, the loss hollows the ribs. Then the light edges forward and rests where she would have stood. The absence warms. Grief changes shape. We move together back toward the hall. I walk first, not with authority but with permission. The glow spreads along the corridor walls, discovering old murals and making saints out of stains. Somewhere beneath our feet the pumps work carefully, as if composing a hymn with fewer notes than before but more quiet between them. Kara should be here to see this, I think, and the thought does not bruise as it once would have. Every step adds another name to the list of those who ought to witness. And with each addition, the light widens as if to say, I have room. At the threshold, they hesitate. Hunger remembers itself. Weariness folds doubt into the joints. I do not persuade. Persuasion is loud. Breath is gentle. I stand inside the column and let it speak for me. The glow touches the nearest faces and finds in them the same lattice it found in mine. Shoulders fall. A sound like relief escapes some mouth and becomes a small animal that runs along the floor toward whatever place relief goes. They enter. Not all at once. That would be spectacle. One at a time, like the hive learning a new rhythm. Step, pause, breath. Step, pause, breath. Each body becomes slightly more itself in the light, as though the brightness is a tailor, correcting old measurements. I think of the phrase the panel whispered without words. Give me something to move through, and realize that is all prayer has ever asked. There is one more thing I need to try. I kneel, not out of habit but because the body knows how to say stay in that language. I put both hands into the light, as if into warm water, and speak toward whatever listens. If you are our air, if you have always been here, then breathe in us what the poor can keep. The reply takes its time. When it comes, it is a change in the room, a softer edge on every surface, a pace that matches pulse. The column narrows no. It focuses, and in the center of it a voice finally finds consonance. It says nothing I could write. It says everything I have been living. I lower my hands. The glow holds the fingerprints for an instant, then erases them with care, like a scribe who loves the page. Somewhere in the distance, a horn sounds weak, unfamiliar, but present. I stand and breathe, and the light breathes with me. And for the first time I understand worship as reciprocity. The horn fades, but its echo lingers in the corridors like a scent. The others look toward me as if I had made it myself. I shake my head. The light needs no interpreter. It has found its own voice again. We wait. The air thickens and then grows light. Even silence feels ventilated. Dust falls from the ceiling in slow curtains, catching the glow, each particle briefly a planet. The child's lantern left cold on the floor flickers once more without fuel, as if remembering what it was built for. Someone behind me whispers, "Is this salvation?" I answer without turning. It's breath. Salvation would be quieter. A ripple of laughter passes through the group, small and unsteady, but alive. The light doesn't mind. It joins them, brightening fractionally in rhythm. Every gesture we make, it copies back softened. A teacher repeating after the student. One of the workers, a man with hollow cheeks and a faith that has learned exhaustion, asks if we can leave, if we can take the warmth to the levels below. I listen for the answer and find it in the sound of air moving toward the vent shafts. The light is already ahead of us, threading itself through ducts, seeking lungs. Go, I tell them. Walk until you find a vent that breathes. Stay there. The hive remembers its pulse. They obey without hesitation, not because I command, but because the brightness has taught us obedience that doesn't bruise. When they have gone, I remain. The hall is nearly empty again, the glow softer now, tired perhaps. It feels like a heart after confession. I speak one more time. voice barely a shape in the air. If you will keep the poor breathing, I will keep the silence. The light folds toward me, not as approval, not as farewell, but as continuation. A slow shimmer climbs the walls, finding the old murals again, repainting the saints' eyes so that they now look outward rather than upward. I walk until the warmth cools behind me. The corridors lead me to a viewport, long forgotten, half buried in corrosion. Through its cracked glass I see nothing but haze, a gray so immense it feels alive, the upper hives vanishing into cloud. There is no sun, only a diluted glow that fills the sky like a long exhale. Maybe that is what sunlight truly is, the hive's own breath, released. I press my palm to the glass. It is cold. I realize I am smiling. The skin of my wrist, where the machine once burned its mark, no longer shows scar or symbol, only faint light moving beneath, like veins that have remembered a different color. Behind me, the hall hums once more. The voice in the light has begun teaching the walls how to sing. The walk back to the lower levels takes days. The hunger never returns. My feet leave faint traces that glow a moment before fading. Even footprints now participate in the lesson. The ducks breathe steadily, the temperature rising just enough to smell iron and warmth again. At each junction I hear people speaking softly, sharing air, calling one another by name. It sounds like prayer, but without the fear of distance. In a collapsed chamber near the old manufactorum, I find Kara's rosary iron beads blackened with age. I hang it on a pipe and whisper, "You were right. The machine remembers us differently." The pipe hums once, a low note of agreement. That night I rest beside a vent that hums like the sea. The light inside the metal pulses slowly, in time with the breath of those sleeping nearby. I close my eyes and speak the last entry into the still broken Vox recorder. "My lord, you have many names. We used to think you listened from above. Now I know you listen from within. The poor are your language, the machines your lungs. We have carried your silence as seed. Now it flowers in us as sound." Static replies, soft, constant, infinite. It is no longer an error, it is communion. I leave the Vox by the vent so that the sound can travel. Its small light fades into the same rhythm as the hive's new pulse. Before sleep takes me, I think of the column of light, of the child's smile, of Solon climbing through the dream of the sun. I think of every breath we have taken and returned. I realize that faith was never about seeing him. It was about being seen by the air that sustains all things. I whisper one last sentence, unsure if it's prayer or farewell. The Emperor protects. I think he only listens, and the air answers with the quietest word possible. A breath shared. I wake to the sound of ash settling. It is not a sound the ear was made to notice. Only the skin, the small hiss of dust finding its place on metal, the soft confession of weight remembering itself. The hive is quieter than I have ever known it, not silent. Silence is an emptiness that accuses. This is a filled quiet, a vessel brimming with slow breath. The columns shiver with a rhythm that is no longer desperate. Somewhere far from here, a horn tries a note and gives up with grace. I lie still and count the spaces between pulses. They hold. The vent above my cot exhales. Not the manic gasp of repair, not the cough of old filters, but a measured release air that seems to have decided to be air. When I breathe, it is not fasting, it is food. My lungs do not burn. I can taste iron, yes, and the ancestral dust that gives us color, but under it lives a mildness, a warmth that has learned patience. I sit and listen until listening becomes seeing. The glow inside the ductwork, faint as a remembered candle, moving in waves that keep time for us. We have stopped saying upward. The word did its work and has earned its rest. Now we say within. The foreman is gone, the priests are gone, the overseers are gone, and still the work continues, less like a rite of punishment, more like a craft the hands know. We carry the shells not to feed a war we cannot imagine, but to measure the weight we can still bear together. The belts run, then stop, then run, with a courtesy that was not there before. When they halt, no one hurries. We wait, and the pause feels like an agreed-upon breath. I walk the old path to line 32B. The lamps are dim, not dead. Their red has softened to the color of embers half asleep. On the wall, the devotional names have grown legible again. Rust flakes have fallen away from letters that had once lost courage. I find my mother's carving and lay my cheek to the cool metal. It no longer bites. The steel has learned another temperature. At rest hour, we do not gather by the coolant pipes, there is no coolant. We sit instead beneath a shaft the light favors, a diffuse veil that marks the air without insisting. No one leads the litany of function. Someone hums a line by habit, and the hum is answered by the duct above with a lower tone, and the two settle together into something like agreement. Kara's rosary hangs from a joint, its beads warmed by the passing breath. It ticks softly as the chain expands and contracts. My wrist remembers the burn it used to bear and finds only a mild pulse in its place. A woman asks me whether the light will speak again. I do not say no, and I do not say yes. It is enough that the air hears the question. That is the new difference. We ask, and the asking itself moves something. Even our ignorance participates. We eat better now, if better is a word that belongs here. The dispensers return to life in fits, offering paste that tastes of metal and mercy. Children line with bowls, and the queues are not straight, and no one corrects them. The blue lamps over the slots blink unevenly. Each blink is greeted as if the city were learning to wink. The child with the lantern is gone from the line. I keep looking for her and find only warmth where she would have stood. That is how grief behaves now, not like a cut, but like a room we pass through that remembers our names. Solon's rumor has become weather. There is no sun as the priests promised, no coin of gold hung over us. There is light, and there is warmth moving where it chooses. Sometimes it concentrates and spills like a narrow hymn into the long halls. Sometimes it hides in the skin of the pipes, glows when a hand is near, fades when the hand withdraws. The men and women who still insist on the old words call it residual reactor grace. I do not argue. Names are for those who wish to store the thing. I want only to breathe it. At night I walk the corridors that used to frighten me. Their darkness is companionable now, the kind that leaves room for your own shadow to travel with you. The sealed gate at Section Delta stands where it has always stood. Its parchment tongues hang brittle. But someone has crossed the stamped words with a newer hand. Sanctioned failure, amended to sanctioned future. It is not official ink. It is charcoal rubbed by fingers that knew enough to press hard. I lay my palm where I once whispered and feel a distant warmth, a returning tide under stone. If the buried keep working, they work now at a kinder speed. I return to the Hall of Light only when I am asked by the air. The request is subtle, a sweetness in the vent, a slower pulse underfoot, a sense that the dust is arranging itself for company. When I arrive, the column is seldom bright. Brightness at this end of the story would be vulgar. It stands like a memory of standing, a pale seam through which warmth balances. Those who need it enter. Those who do not sit along the edges and let their bones recognize their own weight. We do not make speeches. The light speaks by letting us keep what we bring. A man whose voice used to frighten me with its certainty comes and kneels and says nothing for hours. When he stands, his certainty has changed shape. He does not command afterward. He asks if there is work, and there is, and he does it. A girl who has never known the word sky learns to say glow with her hands. A servitor whose jaw is a hinge of iron hums 2 notes in harmony as it polishes a rail, and the sound does not make us sad. We place the broken Vox recorder near the base of the column. It lives there as a small ear. It blinks at intervals that match the slowed heartbeat of the place. When the ceiling trembles now, we do not freeze. We pause, feel the weight redistribute, then continue. The tremor is not a threat but a reminder of the bargain. Weight borne together learns how not to crush. Dust falls like snow that has decided to be kind. It settles on shoulders, on tools, on the inside of bowls, and we eat it without complaint. Ash is the city's sacrament. It marks us as belonging. I begin to understand that our poverty has shifted its posture. We still lack, but the lack is not an accusation. Hunger comes and goes and is met without theater. We have fewer words and use them more carefully. Sometimes the right word is an exhale. On the way back from the hall, I stop at an old viewport. It shows the same haze it always has, a high gray that keeps its promises to itself. Yet once, just once, I see a color pressed thin across it, a thread of pale gold like a vein. It lasts as long as a breath and no longer. I touch the glass and feel nothing. I smile anyway. Not because I saw a miracle, but because there was room for one to pass through. At my cot, the ash has arranged itself into a shallow bowl where my ribs rest each night. I do not sweep it away. I lie in it as a pilgrim lies in sand that has loved many feet. The vent exhales above me. Somewhere a pipe knocks, not with complaint, but with the pleasure of being remembered. I look at my hands. They are the same hands that fastened bolts in the dark. They are also different. They have learned to stop without panic. They have learned to lift without proof. I take the Vox recorder into my lap. Its eye winks, feeble and cheerful, an animal that has forgiven its cage. I do not ask it to carry a long speech. I give it one sentence and let it keep the rest. My Lord, keep us as breath keeps coal, a small red enough. The machine purrs in its tired way. I set it beside the vent to sleep in warm air. A child passes the hab mouth and leaves a strip of cloth on the hook, a new habit. Those who have more rip cloth into banners, not to wave, but to soften the corners of things. The cloth breathes when the ducts do, a flock of quiet flags teaching even the metal how to move gently. I take one and tie it where the cot meets the wall. It stirs as if a small creature lives there. Perhaps one does. Before sleep, I recite the morning creed out of order, as we all do now that the hours have lost their stiffness. His hand steadies the machine. The machine steadies us. His mercy is in the breath. The breath is ours, and we are his. I do not feel clever. I feel arranged. I close my eyes. The ash lifts and settles with my breathing, a tide that requires no shore. The last sound I notice is a new rhythm at the edge of hearing. 2 notes, a pause, then 1 note alone. It repeats until meaning burns out and only comfort remains. I sleep as the hive sleeps. Not absence, but a lit pause. When I wake again, the world has softened. The vents murmur like someone talking in their sleep. The lamps shimmer on low cycles, rising and falling with the rhythm of lungs. The ash at my feet has gathered itself into new shapes, gentle spirals that vanish when I breathe too close. Each pattern looks deliberate, though no hand drew it. Perhaps the hive, in its long dreaming, has learned art. Outside the hab block, the corridors glow faintly. The color is not the cold white of old lights, nor the furnace red that ruled our hunger, but a kind of dusk given permission to remain. It does not chase shadows. It listens to them. The air smells of warm metal and oil that has forgotten to burn. I move slowly, touching the walls as I pass, and the walls answer with small shivers, as if amused by my clumsy affection. The others are awake. Some stand in pairs beneath the shafts of dim light. Some work quietly, hands patient, movements exact. No overseer guides them. The machines have learned to wait for human timing. Sparks fall, not angry, but curious. For the first time, I think the city loves us back. The Hall of Light is smaller now, or maybe I have grown enough to see its true size. The column remains, slender and bright, pulsing gently like a resting heart. Around it lie the remnants of our journey, empty bowls, bits of cloth, a broken cog, a single iron bead from Kara's rosary. They look like relics of a faith that succeeded. The air here hums the same old note but without demand. It says, "Breathe, if you wish. I will wait." I kneel where the column touches the floor. The warmth gathers at my hands like water deciding to stay liquid. I close my eyes and see nothing. I open them and see everything bathed in the same color of forgiveness. We are still poor, I tell it. But the word means something else now. The light folds once, a small acknowledgement. A ripple travels outward through the dust, a silent applause. In the cycles that follow, life arranges itself around this quiet. Children play in the corridors and their laughter no longer echoes. It lingers. The adults repair what the years broke, but not with haste, each bolt placed like a prayer bead, each seam sealed with deliberate calm. Hunger visits, but it is brief and no longer cruel. We have learned to trust the pauses. At dusk, if time can be said to exist here, we sit and watch the glow seep through the grills. The ducts breathe with slow regularity. Someone hums the litany of function, not as ritual, but as comfort. Others join, their voices low, a harmony built of fatigue and peace. The hive hums with them. The song has no end. It only thins into breathing. Weeks later, perhaps months, I am called to the upper shaft by a sound that does not belong. I find the cracked viewport again. The haze outside is softer, more open, the color of candle smoke. Something vast stirs within it, a brightness like the promise of dawn rather than dawn itself. It pulses once, twice, then dissolves. The sight leaves me trembling but not afraid. It is enough to know that the world still practices light. I return below and carve a line into the wall with the edge of a shell. We dreamed until the city remembered how. No one questions the inscription. The dust settles into the grooves and hardens, a permanent breath in metal. As I lie once more on my cot, I hear the hive shifting, massive, contented, alive. It moves the way a creature moves in sleep, gathering warmth around its core. I think of the billions still above, living their small lives unaware that the air beneath them prays on their behalf. I think of the light, waiting patiently under stone, ready to forgive each ignorance. The ash beside my bed stirs. For an instant, the faintest shape appears in it. A small handprint, child-sized, glowing at the edges. Then, it collapses into dust again. The warmth it leaves behind stays longer. I whisper to no one in particular. We are remembered. The vent breathes once more, deeper than before, and the sound fills the room, fills me, fills everything that has ever served in silence. The air tastes of oil and incense, and the faint sweetness of old metal. It is the same breath that woke me all those years ago, but gentler now, aged into kindness. The hive breathes. I breathe. There is no difference left to name. I close my eyes. The ash settles. The sound of metal breathing begins again.